Welcome to the EXCELcast. I'm Jonathan Kuskiski, Assistant Director for the EXCEL program at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance here at the University of Michigan. And today my guest is Steven Sposito, who is one of our 2016 Alumni Award winners, who is a 2007 BFA Theater Directing graduate. So welcome back to campus. It's
Thank
your
you.
first time back in 9 years.
Yes, it is.
And in the last 9 years has had quite a varied career. Currently Associate Director for the Book of Mormon, previously having worked in directorship roles, in various roles with Wicked and Shrek the Musical.
Yes.
So it's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So today we're going to talk about the life of a director.
Okay.
And I want to start with sort of a snapshot. So for you, if we were to look at what you do right now in your career, what you've done, on a regular basis, what's a day in your life like as a director?
So, I mean, primarily the job I do now is as the Associate Director for the Book of Mormon, where a team of us oversees the Broadway company and the North American tour. And our days sort of change day to day. We are involved in the audition process where we see new actors and help coach them and select the actors who are in the show. And then once we've chosen the actors, we go through a rehearsal process that starts sort of around a table discussing the piece and the tone and the style and some of its development process. And then moves on to the actual staging with the actors, and eventually we move to the physical stage and work with the other members of the company and incorporate costumes and the lights and the orchestra. And then once actors are up and in the show, we stay with them through their entire contract and sort of provide a maintenance. It's sort of a terrible word to use, but it's an idea that we're the eyes in the audience for the actor, and we check in with them and sort of try to keep their process growing through their year or two or three with the show.
That's great. Okay, so I'm curious, you've had other roles too. So you've been a assistant director for Shrek the Musical on Broadway, right? But then you also, with them, directed a national and international tour.
Right.
So what's the difference? I mean, for some of our audience it's clear, but maybe not for all.
So when you're working on an original Broadway show, your main job is to work within the artistic parameters that the original director set. Yeah. So on Book of Mormon, every decision I'm making, you kind of ask yourself, what would Casey Nicholaw, the original director of the show, do? So we're always sort of focusing through Casey's eyes. And that was a lot of my work on Shrek on Broadway. Since then, we've done different tours and different productions of it that are not associated with the original production. So they're sort of your own view of how that show can be directed and how it can move for that specific production. Okay.
So it varies. When you think a little bit further back, let's say to your time here at Michigan. Obviously, you came in for pursuing a BFA. So maybe you had aspirations to work as a theater director. Was that one of your goals?
No, I wanted to be a director. I came in sort of specifically for the directing program. It's one of the few undergraduate programs that you can focus on directing into the country. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Ohio. I'm not so sure I knew exactly what a director did, but I was sure that's what I wanted to be. So I think my time here was incredibly helpful, as I grew as an artist and also as a person. And this is where I really fell in love with directing because I knew what it was here. And this is where it really solidified, okay, I actually do want to do this going forward into the professional world. But yeah, I never was an actor. I never had that skill set,
Right. So you came in with these dreams to be a director.
Yeah.
And then your experience here solidified them. So tell us a little bit about what does that mean in terms of thinking back to your experience? Were there key opportunities that were presented to you when you think back and go, oh my gosh, that opportunity created so much space for me to learn in an accelerated way, either in school or after school?
Yeah, I mean, the directing program, I think, does a great job of giving you some practical experience. I directed 2 plays and 2 musicals. The plays were through the department, and the musicals were through Musket, the student-run theater group, which was a great experience because you're kind of, on your own with this other group of students to put on this mammoth production. So those were great opportunities to learn from practical experience. And then I had sort of 2 key assistantships. We brought in a guest artist named Andrea Fry, whom I assisted, and she was incredibly valuable in terms of information, and then generous with her contacts in the professional world. She hired me to assist a show regionally that she directed, and recommended me to another director to assist a show. So it was a great sort of beginning of a network, and being able to interact with professionals here at the university. And we also had this Royal Shakespeare Company internship where they would send a student every other summer to the Royal Shakespeare Company in England, and you would see a show, the process of rehearsing a show from beginning till end. And that was incredibly formative for me with how to approach text, sort of the ideas behind reinterpreting a Shakespeare classic. And they're a company, so they work in a rep system, and we had 3 months of rehearsals. It was just a very once in a lifetime experience on how they work as a company. So that was really, really helpful. Yeah.
Sure. So, okay, you're nearing graduation. Or let's say you graduate.
Right.
Okay. Do you move directly to New York? And
No.
what are the things that went through your mind at that moment or in that period of time in your life?
Terror, just scared, just really scared of everything. No, I never thought I'd move to New York. I thought I'd move to Chicago.
See.
But when I graduated, I took sort of meetings with everyone that I could, and someone that I met with was Ben Klein, who's a graduate of the department, and he had done a bunch of work on Broadway, and we had a great meeting, and he was incredibly supportive, and he said, yeah, if I hear of anything, I'll let you know. And 2 weeks later, he called me and said, hey, I'm turning down this role on Shrek to do another project. Do you want to interview for it? So Ben was really, my in to the professional theater world, and very much helped, secure an interview for me, and was and still is supportive, and we're still friends. And he's been a really great person, who's a graduate and who was always incredibly helpful. So that's how my career started, sort of technically with a job, that Ben helped me get.
I see.
Yeah.
Great. So, and it seems to me, one thing you're talking about here, of course, is this idea of networking, but
Right.
it seems organic. It seems based on, a good experience that someone had, a
Yeah.
connection that you made with someone.
I feel
Yeah.
networking is never about getting a job. It's about
Right.
building a relationship.
Right.
I think where I see people go wrong is they're trying to get hired for something, and I think in the arts it's all a bit more loose. So I meet with so many people, and it's like a first date. You're just sitting down and trying to get to know someone, and they're trying to get to know you and see if this is going to be a good match.
Yeah.
And if it is, lots of work can come for that. It's almost never one job, and if it's not, it's not meant to be. So yeah, it's about developing relationships as opposed to just getting hired for a one-off piece.
It's a great way to frame that.
Yeah.
Okay, so and so let's fast forward a little bit more. So it seems to me that the role of a director demands a varied set of skills, right? I mean, you have to know the theater that you're working in,
Right.
For sure. But it seems like you also, of course, are talking about building a familiarity with not just how to communicate effectively, but a willingness and an interest in getting to know all sorts of different types of people, communicating in many different ways. So how did you develop those skills? Was that something that you kind of felt like you brought with you? Did you, develop some? Are there particular skills that you felt like when you got into that first job, you said, "Oh my
Right.
gosh, I have ground to cover here"? I
I think I got better at. I certainly developed those skills. Those were not ready-made in any way, shape, or form. I think when you're first starting out as an assistant, you do a lot of watching, and it's mainly all watching. You may spend 8 hours a day, 6 days a week watching a director direct, and it's a lot of time to not feel like you're active. And I
Yes.
think I learned a way to watch and stay alive and stay active and stay engaged in a process and a focus that I never had before in my life. And so that was certainly helpful. And then the more you work with different people, the better you get at communicating. And I think I think my skills of sort of communicating from a compassionate standpoint
Yes.
and trying to be and just trying to engage with another human being, I think were very much developed in the real world. And just the older you get, the more you understand that it's just about connecting with people. You're trying to connect with people and figure out a problem. I mean, I love people. I mean, I love that's what I'm interested in is sort of other humans. So theater always felt like the right place to be if that's what you're interested in. If you're interested in the human condition,
That's
this is the place to be, you know, and how we process through that.
Yes, sure.
So, yeah, all that was developed along the way, I think.
That's great. Okay, another kind of related question, which it really, so you mentioned the word terror earlier.
Yeah.
And I think so many students, I know I felt that way at one point in my life,
Yeah.
close to graduation, just not knowing exactly what my path was going to be. So, you know, now you're working in a sort of, in a steady way with these different shows, but there are periods of time, right, where you transition from one to the other.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious just how you think about, you know, your next thing,
right?
You know, whether, and then maybe thinking back even to a past experience where you were transitioning, is there a certain stress that you experience in that? Is there sort of a strategic thinking element? Is it just sort of, you know, look, I'm living in this, I'm doing the best I can, I really want to focus on this work, and when the next thing comes, the next thing comes. I'm curious what your experience is.
I think it's been all of those things at different times in my life. I certainly think I was definitely scared when I graduated and when I was in school. You know, I think you work in these, you work in the arts and it's really unpredictable, and you have these real world concerns about money and stability and, you know, family, and it's a lot to sort of manage. I think the more that I've done this, I'm less scared and more excited. I think that's what's sort of taken over, is that, you know, yeah, you still are afraid, certainly a little bit, but you kind of let go of some of that irrational fear of like, what if it all crashes down? Because you know it's not going to all crash down.
Yeah.
You know, it may change, and it certainly will change, and it certainly will evolve, but that's really exciting. So that's what I've tried to feed myself with, is the excitement of what's next, and the excitement of how do you grow? How do you continue to challenge yourself? You know, how do you continue to go deeper into your artistry, and what is that process like? And that's what's really exciting to me now at this juncture in my life, is it's less about where is my next job, you know, and it's more about how do I grow and evolve, and what's next creatively. So some of that I think is just what happens when you've worked in a field for a while, and some of that I do think is me changing the way I view it.
Yeah.
You know, being scared only helps you a little bit. It does help you, but only a little bit. You know, you have to be careful it doesn't consume you and stop you from moving forward. You know, so I view it differently now.
That's great. I think that's great advice too, because you know, for many students thinking 10 years in the future, it's hard to imagine.
It's very hard. Yeah. And you don't know, I mean, you don't know, you have no idea what's going to happen, and you almost can't plan for 10 years in the future. You can only plan for what is my next step. And I always try to look at that less about like, where do I work next, or what job is next, and more, what's the next chapter? What's the next idea that I want to? When I graduated, all I wanted to do was be in a rehearsal room. That was the goal, is how do I stay in a room with actors and around in the room where this process is happening. And that for me meant assisting, you know, and that could have meant something different for someone else.
Yes.
But I don't know if I necessarily approached assisting as much as I approached just being in the room, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think that's really also great advice for performing artists of any type, because so much of what it means to be a professional performing artist is to be engaged in project-based career development, right? So, and understanding what's the next project for me, not just because this is a good project to be doing, but it's going to satisfy this need that I have for my creative work, and also recognition of the next thing I want to be doing to develop myself.
Right.
So I'm so glad that you framed that this way. So thinking now to our student audience, you know, when you think about when you're looking at young professionals, those that are coming out of school now, and some of whom have already maybe had some professional experience, but they're engaging now full time. They're at that point when you were, you know, leaving school. What are some of the things that you look for in young people, or, you know, if you were to imagine hiring a young person coming right out of school, what are some of the skills, mindsets, some of the key things you would tell them to be working on to set themselves up for success?
I think for me, for anyone, whether it's an actor or a designer or an assistant, you know, we're going to create something together. You know, so it's less this idea of like, I need you to come in with this skill set and that, you know, but we're going to all sit in a room together and say, how do we tell this story? You know, how do we create this piece of theater? So you need someone that's comfortable enough in who they are to be vulnerable and engage and be present with you and kind of like ride that wave with you that will go in many different directions. I think people that are too, stuck in who they think they are and who they think something is less helpful for me. So I do try to look for that and tease that out in an audition process or in a interview. Certainly people have to have a skill set. There's sort of a base level skill set, but when you really get down to it, I want someone I can be in a room with and that I feel like I can create with, because that's the scariest part of directing is you really need those other people to be with you. And if that doesn't happen, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, well, I love how you frame this sense of community that comes out of a project. And I think theater, of all of these different types of sort of expressions of the performing arts, it really is a community, right? Because you have so many different people with very different skill sets. You have the production and the performers and the directors and everybody else who have to come together in order for it to be successful. So. Yeah, so it's great to hear you. It's great to hear you talk about that. I can see the joy that comes through, and you're just describing the process and honoring the process. I think that's one area where we think about in career development that there's no one can sit here and prescribe to you this is what's going to happen.
Of course,
you have to be in exactly the same way, regardless of whether you're looking for an internship or you're looking to build a career in front, on the stage or behind the scenes. You have to sort of become comfortable with the uncomfortability of growing and collaborating with a team of new people. So
there's always change. There's always and that's what's fun about. That's what can be fun about it if you let it be. Yeah.
Great. Well, it's so great to have you back. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about your career and about some of these other topics. And we look forward to seeing what you'll do in the next 10 years.
Great. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.